If you try to picture, like, the absolute pinnacle of an idyllic, innocent childhood, you probably picture Christopher Robin.
Oh, definitely. Playing with Winnie the Pooh in the 100-acre wood.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's basically a cultural monument to this pure, untroubled bond between a father, a son, and, just a brilliant imagination.
Yeah, it's the ultimate family fairy tale.
But what you probably don't picture is the real Christopher Robin growing up and completely severing ties with his father, A. A. Milne.
Wow. Yeah, most people have no idea about that.
No idea. He publicly accused his dad of exploiting his childhood to achieve fame. He said it left him with nothing but an empty name.
That is just, it completely shatters the mythology we instinctively build around family, right?
Completely. The boy who inspired the ultimate family fairy tale was totally estranged from his own family.
And it gets even darker. His mother was actually so furious about this estrangement that she refused a deathbed reconciliation with him.
Wait, really? On her deathbed?
Yeah, she just wouldn't see him. And, the Milne family secret isn't just some anomaly of fame. It's this incredibly guarded human reality that millions of people are navigating in total silence.
And that is exactly what we are diving into today, this hidden epidemic of family estrangement.
It's such a heavy topic, but so necessary.
Right. We want to look at that agonizing territory between a relationship rupturing and the seemingly impossible task of repairing it.
Yeah.
And really get into the actual mechanical anatomy of forgiveness.
And we have a really brilliant stack of sources to guide this deep dive today.
Yeah, tell us what we're working with.
So on the empirical side, we're looking at the Cornell Estrangement and Reconciliation Project, which was led by family sociologist Dr. Karl Pillemer. He actually conducted the first comprehensive national survey on family rifts.
Which is wild that it was the first.
I know. And we are interweaving those rigorous sociological findings with these profound theological insights from a multi-faith spiritual care conference.
Bringing in the religious perspective, too.
Exactly. We have perspectives from Rabbi Frederick L. Klein, Reverend Renwick Bell, and Professor Iqbal Akhtar.
So, just to be clear with you listening, the mission today isn't just to stare at the wreckage of broken families.
Right. We're not just disaster gawking.
Exactly. We want to figure out how ancient religious traditions and modern sociological data, surprisingly, they really align on how to heal these fractures.
Or, at the very least, how to peacefully and safely detach from them if healing isn't an option.
Yeah. But to understand the solutions, I feel like we first have to grasp the sheer terrifying scale of the problem.
Oh, the scale is staggering. When Dr. Pillemer began his research, he noted that the topic of family estrangement was essentially a ghost in the academic world.
A ghost?
Yeah, you could look through these massive, comprehensive textbooks on family therapy and find literally 0 index entries for family estrangement.
That is crazy. So therapists weren't even being formally trained on it.
Basically, no. And Pillemer's data totally upends the societal narrative we have that family bonds are just unbreakable by default.
Right, because you read his numbers and realize this isn't some rare fringe thing happening to a tiny fraction of troubled households.
Not at all. So Pillemer asked this very rigid, conservative question in his national random sample survey.
What did he ask?
He asked, do you have any family members from whom you are currently estranged and have no contact with at the present time?
Okay, so a very clear current cutoff.
Exactly. And 27% of Americans said yes.
Wait, sorry, 27%?
Yeah, 27.
That is over 65 million people.
It's massive.
I mean, if you're standing in a grocery store line with 10 people, statistically, 3 of them are carrying this weight right now.
That's exactly it. And to break those demographics down a bit further, about 10% of the population, which translates to over 25 million people, are estranged from a parent or child.
Wow. A parent or child, that's the core unit.
Yeah. And another 8% are estranged from a sibling. And here is the really crazy part. When the researchers filtered the data to ask if this estrangement had gone on for more than a year, and if it was currently upsetting to them, the numbers barely dropped.
Meaning it's not just a temporary fight where people stop talking for a week.
Right. It implies a massive chronic condition.
But, okay, if 65 million people are walking around with this chronic condition, it really makes you wonder why it feels so invisible.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if 65 million people had a specific type of chronic back pain, we would have telethons, right? You'd have awareness ribbons and support groups on every corner.
Well, that's where Pillemer's qualitative interviews come in. They highlight this intense, suffocating social stigma around the issue.
The shame of it.
Exactly. People described living under this black cloud of shame and embarrassment because society has this deeply ingrained bias, right?
Yeah, this underlying assumption that if your own family,
Mm.
the people biologically obligated to love you, if they don't want to speak to you, there must be something fundamentally defective about you.
Exactly. People hide the reality just to avoid the judgment of their neighbors or coworkers.
But the pain of this isn't just about feeling judged or, missing an awkward Thanksgiving dinner.
No, it goes so much deeper than that.
The sources discuss this concept of interpersonal rejection and how it actually registers in the human brain as severe trauma.
Yeah, it's an evolutionary response.
Right. Because we have these biologically based attachments forged over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. I mean, we are primates.
We need our pack.
Exactly. For most of our evolutionary history, if your pack kicked you out, you died. You either starved or you were hunted.
So your body physically reacts to the rejection?
Yeah. So when a parent or a sibling cuts you off today, your nervous system isn't just processing sadness. It is processing an existential threat.
Your biology reacts as if your survival is in immediate jeopardy. And the physiological response to family rejection actually mirrors the response to physical injury. Which brings us to a psychological concept that makes estrangement uniquely agonizing, even compared to other forms of loss. It's called ambiguous loss, developed by a researcher named Pauline Boss.
Ambiguous loss. So, how is that different from regular grief?
Well, with death, there's a biological end. You have a funeral, a socially recognized mourning period, and a structure to the grief.
Closure, basically.
Exactly. But ambiguous loss happens when a person is physically absent, but psychologically present.
Oh, man. It's exactly like having a really heavy app running in the background of your smartphone.
That is a perfect analogy.
Right, like you might be trying to go about your day, answering emails or making dinner, but this unresolved situation is just silently, constantly draining your battery.
Draining your emotional battery, yes.
Because you don't know if they're coming back, you don't know if they're safe, you don't know if you should keep trying to reach out or just finally give up.
And human psychology inherently craves cognitive closure.
Yeah.
We naturally want to move towards certainty.
Even if it's bad certainty.
Right. A definitively bad outcome, like a death, allows the brain's cognitive machinery to begin the healing and acceptance process. Estrangement deprives the brain of that closure.
It's just endless limbo.
Yeah, and that hope of reconciliation, mixed with the ongoing pain of the rejection, it keeps the nervous system trapped in a chronic stress loop.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Pillemer actually noted something fascinating from his earlier research on older people. He found that one of the most common regrets expressed by people in their 80s and 90s wasn't about business failures or, not traveling enough.
What was it?
It was unresolved family estrangements.
Wow.
Yeah. It is a wound that the brain just refuses to close.
Okay, so if 65 million people are carrying this running background app, what is causing the system crash in the first place?
Well, looking at Pillemer's data, estrangement seems to fall into two main categories: the inevitable and the accidental.
Let's break those down. The inevitable and the accidental.
So that's an effective way to categorize the four primary pathways to fracture that his sociological data identified.
Okay, what's in the inevitable bucket?
That includes what he terms the long arm of the past. This involves severe childhood trauma, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, or just extremely harsh and rigid parenting.
Got it. So these are family foundations that were fundamentally cracked from the very moment the concrete was poured.
Exactly. And in those severe cases, detachment is not a failure. It is a vital survival mechanism.
Right, obviously. But the other pathways feel more like a perfectly fine house that just randomly gets hit by a tornado.
Those are the accidental triggers. And the second pathway is a huge one: divorce and in-laws.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
They make up a massive percentage of estrangements. We see situations where non-custodial parents slowly become detached over decades, or adult children harbor this deep, unresolved resentment toward a parent for a divorce that shattered their childhood.
And the in-law dynamic is notoriously tricky, too.
Incredibly common. You have scenarios where a new spouse systematically alienates a person from their family of origin, or the reverse. The family simply refuses to accept the new spouse, forcing this volatile dynamic of divided loyalties.
It becomes this awful zero-sum game of it's me or them.
And whoever issues that ultimatum usually ends up losing.
Yeah, nobody wins that game.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the third pathway?
The third is money and inheritance.
Ah, of course. It's always about money.
Well, people constantly say it's about the money, but looking at Pillemer's research, it is rarely about the literal dollar amount.
Really? Then what is it about?
It's about what the money signifies. So imagine a parent leaves a larger portion of their estate to the child who served as their primary caregiver for the last 10 years of their life.
Okay, mathematically and logically, that is entirely fair.
Right. But to the other siblings, it doesn't feel equal. If there isn't transparent communication before the parent passes away, that perceived lack of fairness registers as a final, permanent verdict on who the parent truly loved more.
Oh, wow. It becomes an unarguable final statement of value.
Exactly. A literal appraisal of their worth in the family.
That is heartbreaking. And the fourth pathway.
The fourth pathway involves profound value differences. You know that cultural trope that opposites attract?
Sure, yeah.
Well, in close, long-term human relationships, alignment of core values is actually crucial.
That makes sense. So when those values drastically diverge, things fall apart.
Right. Whether it's someone leaving a strict religious tradition, adopting a fundamentally different lifestyle, or parents rejecting a child's LGBTQ identity, the rift can become completely insurmountable.
Because it hits at the core of who you are.
Reverend Dell actually discussed his work dealing with children who were disowned by their parents over their sexual orientation. In those cases, the ideological and theological divide literally overrides the biological bond.
It's devastating. But, what stands out to me about all four of these pathways is how long they take to develop.
Oh, absolutely. They are often decades in the making.
Right. Yet when you ask someone why they haven't spoken to their sibling in 10 years, they rarely articulate these deep structural issues.
Never.
They'll say, I haven't spoken to my brother since he kept our grandfather's antique clock. Or, my sister didn't let my husband give a toast at her wedding.
Right.
To an outside observer, these sound like incredibly petty, ridiculous grievances to lose a family member over.
But sociologists refer to these moments as transformational relationship events.
Transformational relationship events. Explain that.
So to the outside world, it's just a clock. But to the estranged sibling, that clock represents 30 years of the brother always being favored, always taking what he wanted, and never considering anyone else's feelings.
Ah, so it's the final straw in a really long, invisible cascade of friction.
Exactly. The single event is merely the catalyst for the accumulated tension to finally just snap.
Which creates a massive psychological hurdle for reconciliation, right?
Yeah.
Because both sides walk away from that final straw with entirely different memories of what actually happened.
Yes. And this brings us to the trap of dual narratives. It seems to be the most stubborn roadblock in Pillemer's entire research.
Because two siblings raised in the exact same house will have wildly incompatible versions of reality.
Totally incompatible. One person remembers a nickname as normal, affectionate childhood teasing, and the other person remembers it as daily, sadistic, emotional abuse.
How does that happen? How can two people be in the same room and remember it so differently?
Well, memory is not a passive video recording that we simply play back. It is an active reconstruction, influenced by emotion, identity, and your present state of mind.
Oh, interesting.
Plus, siblings often occupy entirely different ecological niches within the same family structure.
Like a golden child versus the scapegoat.
Exactly. So when estrangement occurs, people naturally retreat into echo chambers. They surround themselves with friends or spouses who validate their specific narrative and confirm their status as the aggrieved party.
They build a defense case.
Right. And Pillemer reached a really sobering conclusion after interviewing hundreds of estranged individuals. He said, if you wait for your family member's narrative to align perfectly with yours before you attempt to reconcile, you will wait forever.
Oh, man. I have to challenge this on behalf of the listener, because that sounds deeply unsettling.
That is unsettling.
Are we basically saying that to get your family back, you just have to swallow your pride and accept a version of reality where your pain is invalidated?
Yeah.
Or worse, a reality where you are framed as the villain of the story? Like, how is that fair to someone who is genuinely hurt?
I mean, it fundamentally is not fair. But fairness is a temporal, earthly concept.
Okay.
If you demand perfect historical accuracy and perfect fairness from a flawed human being, you're essentially choosing the satisfaction of being right over the reality of being reconciled.
Wow.
Pillemer found that the people who successfully mended their family rifts had to abandon the hope of a shared past and focus entirely on negotiating a shared future.
That is an incredibly bitter pill to swallow. I mean, giving up on a shared past.
It's the exact pivot point where sociological pragmatism reaches its absolute limit.
Meaning sociology can only take us so far.
Right. Sociology provides the data on what mechanically works to stop the bleeding in a relationship. But to deal with the spiritual and emotional unfairness of that compromise, we have to look to the theology.
Okay, let's bring in the theologians then.
All three religious traditions represented at the conference teach that to navigate this inherent unfairness, we have to completely decouple two concepts that modern culture treats as synonyms:
Which are?
forgiveness and reconciliation.
Oh, yeah. We definitely use those interchangeably all the time. Like if I say, I forgive you, society expects that to mean we're going out for coffee tomorrow and the relationship is fully restored.
But the theologians argue that conflating the two is actually spiritually dangerous.
Really? How so?
Reverend Renwick Bell, presenting the Christian perspective, clarified that forgiveness is an unconditional, internal, individual act.
Individual. Meaning I do it alone.
Exactly. It's a deliberate process of letting go of resentment and the desire for vengeance, primarily for your own personal healing.
Okay. And reconciliation.
Reconciliation, however, is a mutual, conditional process. It absolutely requires the offender to demonstrate accountability, behavioral change, and repentance.
Oh, I love that distinction. So forgiveness is something I can do alone in my room, prioritizing my own peace of mind, without ever actually restoring the relationship with the person who harmed me.
Precisely. And Rabbi Frederick L. Klein brings this out forcefully from the Jewish perspective, citing the great philosopher Maimonides.
What does Maimonides say?
Well, Judaism views holding a grudge as an act of sin. Leviticus pairs the commandment against taking vengeance with the commandment to love your neighbor.
Okay.
And the Talmud uses this brilliant, highly specific illustration to differentiate vengeance from bearing a grudge.
Oh, the tool example. I remember this from the sources. Let me see if I have it right.
Go for it.
So if I ask to borrow your hammer, and you refuse, then the next day, you ask to borrow my sickle. If I say no because you didn't lend me your hammer yesterday, that is vengeance.
Right. Eye for an eye.
But if I say, here is my sickle, I am not petty like you were yesterday, the Talmud says that is bearing a grudge.
Exactly. Because you performed the correct action by lending the tool, but you held on to the moral superiority.
Yeah, you gave the tool but kept the anger. I love how specific that is.
True forgiveness requires dropping the ego entirely. But Rabbi Klein emphasized a crucial caveat here.
What's the caveat?
This does not mean Judaism advocates blindly forgiving an unrepentant person in a way that excuses moral protest.
So you can't just be a doormat.
Right. Unconditional forgiveness internally does not mean unconditional reconciliation externally. Mercy requires accountability. Otherwise, you're simply enabling further injustice and participating in the degradation of your own dignity.
Wow. Participating in the degradation of your own dignity. That is powerful.
Yeah. And Professor Iqbal Akhtar introduced a concept from Islam that takes this idea of accountability and elevates it to a staggering theological level.
Okay, let's hear the Islamic perspective.
He discussed the strict distinction between the rights of God and the rights of people.
The rights of God versus people. How does that work?
The concepts are huquq Allah versus huquq al-ibad.
Okay.
So if you commit a sin against God, perhaps you neglect your prayers or you break a fast, God is infinitely merciful, omnipotent, and can choose to forgive you directly.
That makes sense.
But if you wrong a fellow human being, if you steal their property, abuse them, or slander their reputation, you violate huquq al-ibad.
The rights of people.
Exactly. And Islamic theology dictates that God will not forgive you for that sin until the victim themselves pardons you.
That is profound.
Isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, God, who is omnipotent, voluntarily limits his own sovereign power to forgive out of pure deference to human rights.
That's exactly how Professor Akhtar framed it. The victim retains an inalienable right to justice that even divine command does not override.
That totally prevents religious bypassing, where an abuser tries to use piety or prayer to ignore the actual human beings they've destroyed.
Yes, exactly. There is actually a famous hadith that illustrates the absolute severity of this regarding the Day of Judgment.
What's the hadith?
It describes a person who arrives before God with a mountain of good deeds, a lifetime of prayers, fasting, and charity.
Sounds like a good track record.
Right, but they had abused, slandered, and cheated people in life. Because the victim's rights must be paid, the abuser's good deeds are systematically transferred to the victims.
Wait, their good deeds are transferred? Like a currency?
Yes. And if the good deeds run out and the debt of justice still isn't paid, The victim's sins are literally loaded onto the abuser.
Oh my gosh. That places immense power and like a really heavy responsibility in the hands of the person who was hurt.
It completely rejects what Reverend Bell called sentimental forgiveness.
Sentimental forgiveness. I like that phrase.
Yeah, Bell argued that if you restore a relationship without requiring the offender to change, you aren't acting out of love. You are acting out of sentimentality.
Right. You reveal the shallowness of your love by allowing them to remain comfortably in their destructive behavior.
Exactly. So, to synthesize this untangling we've just done, forgiveness is essentially canceling a debt in your own internal accounting ledger so you can stop obsessing over the math, close the book, and finally sleep at night.
Right. But reconciliation is deciding whether or not to open a new line of credit with that exact same person.
That's a great way to put it.
Like you don't hand a new credit card to a serial defaulter just because you forgave their old debt. You don't give them a new loan unless they sit down and show you a completely new business plan.
And that new business plan is what we call genuine repentance.
Okay, so this brings us to a really interesting crossroads.
How so?
Well, this is where the modern sociological data and the ancient theology run headfirst into this fascinating contradiction regarding the mechanics of how people actually repair these relationships.
Ah, yes, the apology trap.
Right, because if we need a new business plan to reconcile, you would naturally assume step one is demanding a sincere apology.
Sure.
But Pillemer's sociological research found that people who actually managed to put their estranged families back together largely had to completely abandon the need for an apology.
It sounds crazy, right?
It does. Why would you give up on the one universally recognized signal that someone has actually changed?
Because of the unique, totalizing nature of family estrangement.
Totalizing. What do you mean?
Well, when siblings are estranged, or a parent and child, the grievance is rarely about a single, isolated event.
Like we talked about with the grandfather clock.
Exactly. The estranged person isn't asking the offender to apologize for keeping the clock. They are demanding the offender apologize for who they fundamentally are.
Oh, I see.
An estranged child is often asking a parent to admit that their entire parenting style, their entire adult personality, was a toxic failure.
Which obviously no human being is going to do. Asking someone to invalidate their core identity or admit that their entire life's effort was abusive, that triggers the ultimate psychological defensiveness.
It does. And Pillemer subjects found that demanding that level of comprehensive apology just entrenches the dual narratives even further.
Right, everybody just digs their heels in.
So sociology says, to achieve practical peace in the real world, you must drop the demand for a historical apology and focus purely on negotiating future behavior.
Okay, but how does that square with the theologians? Because they were adamant that without repentance, reconciliation is practically a sin.
Right. And to understand that, we have to look at how theology actually defines repentance.
Okay.
It is far more rigorous, structured, and behavioral than a simple verbal, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Rabbi Klein discussed teshuvah, which is the Jewish concept of repentance.
Teshuvah.
Yes. It translates literally to return. It's about returning to a natural, holy state.
I love that framing. It implies that the person just wandered off the path, rather than being inherently permanently evil.
Exactly. It's very hopeful. But Maimonides outlines 4 strict mechanical steps for teshuvah.
What are the steps?
First, you must recognize the sin and immediately stop the behavior.
Stop doing the bad thing. Makes sense.
Second, you must experience genuine regret.
Okay.
Third, you must verbally confess it. And fourth, you must resolve in your heart never to repeat the offense.
Step 3 is interesting to me. The verbal confession. Why is the verbal confession necessary if the person already feels profound internal regret? Like, what does speaking the words out loud actually do to the human psyche?
That's a great question. Verbal confession shatters the ego.
Oh.
Because internal regret allows you to keep your pride intact.
Right.
You can feel bad privately while still maintaining your public dignity.
Right. Nobody else has to know you screwed up.
Exactly. But speaking the words forces you to externalize your failure, to strip away your defenses, and submit to the reality of the harm you caused. It is a profound behavioral transformation.
That is so much heavier than just saying, my bad.
Yeah. And Reverend Bell provided a Christian checklist for genuine repentance that mirrors this rigor.
What was on his list?
The very first sign he listed was accepting full responsibility. None of this modern public relations maneuvering, like, I'm sorry if you were offended,
Ugh, the worst.
or I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah, those are defensive postures, not apologies.
Exactly. Genuine repentance means welcoming accountability, making restitution, and importantly, not getting defensive when the victim doesn't immediately turn to you again.
Because earning trust takes time.
Right. Now, the religious texts from the conference included 2 Talmudic stories that perfectly illustrate the philosophy of apologies.
Okay, let's hear them.
They show why tossing a superficial apology at someone is not just insufficient, it can actually be highly manipulative. The first is the story of the Brisker Rav on the train.
Oh, this story is such a brilliant exposure of human nature. You listen to this and you're like, yep, that is exactly how people act.
Set the scene for us.
So, the Brisker Rav is this highly revered 19th century scholar. And he's traveling anonymously on a train, deeply immersed in studying.
He's just minding his own business.
Right. And some men in the car are playing cards, and they invite him to join.
Yeah.
He ignores them.
Because he's studying.
Exactly. But they take offense at being ignored by this random traveler.
Yeah.
They start bullying him and eventually physically throw him out of the train car.
Yeah.
Just totally humiliating him.
Terrible. But then the train later pulls into the town of Brisk, and the entire town is waiting at the platform to honor their great rabbi.
And the card players see this.
Yes. The bullies from the train realize that the anonymous man they just assaulted is the famous Brisker Rav. They are absolutely mortified.
Obvious.
So they run up to him, groveling, just begging for his forgiveness.
And because he's a holy man, the spiritual leader, you naturally expect him to graciously absolve them, right?
Right. But he says no.
He refuses.
Yeah. They ask again, and he refuses again. His students are totally confused and ask him why he's withholding forgiveness.
What does he say?
The Brisker Rav replies to his students. They are not asking forgiveness from the anonymous man on the train who they abused. They are asking forgiveness from the famous Brisker Rav to relieve themselves of their own guilt. If they truly want forgiveness, they must seek out that anonymous man and apologize to him.
It is such a piercing insight. They weren't sorry that they humiliated a vulnerable human being. They were just terrified they had insulted a VIP.
Yep. They wanted to manage their own reputation.
Exactly. True repentance requires owning the actual harm done to the actual victim, not just trying to clear your own conscience.
And the second story, about Rav and the butcher, explores the dangerous flip side of this dynamic.
Oh, the flip side. How does this one go?
So a butcher deeply insults a great scholar named Rav. Time passes, and Yom Kippur approaches, the Jewish Day of Atonement.
Okay.
The butcher hasn't apologized, so Rav decides to take the spiritual high road. He says, I will go to him and appease him.
Which sounds incredibly noble. He's absorbing the blow and being the peacemaker.
Right. But when Rav approaches the butcher, who is sitting there splitting an animal's head with an axe, the butcher looks up and says, Go away, I have nothing to say to you.
Ouch.
Then the butcher strikes the skull again. A bone flies up, hits the butcher in the throat, and kills him.
It reads like a fable, obviously, but the psychological insight there is intense.
Very intense.
Because approaching an unrepentant person isn't always an act of holiness. Sometimes it's literally driven by our own ego.
We want to be seen as the bigger person.
Exactly. But by forcing an encounter on someone who hasn't done the rigorous work of teshuvah, Rav gave the butcher an opportunity to double down on his cruelty. He essentially facilitated further sin.
Sometimes forcing reconciliation exacerbates the damage.
It makes it worse.
Yeah. Sociology provides the pragmatic tool for living with deeply flawed people, dropping the demand for a perfect apology just to keep the peace.
Right.
But theology provides the gold standard. It warns us that while we might accept an imperfect apology to survive a Thanksgiving dinner, we shouldn't mistake it for true spiritual repair.
Man. And this tension gets exponentially harder when the person who hurt you shares your DNA.
Oh, without doubt. Blood ties complicate everything.
Because we have this deep cultural anxiety about cutting off family. Are we fundamentally biologically obligated to maintain these relationships no matter how much damage they cause?
Well, all 3 traditions have complex, deep doctrines regarding filial obligation. Rabbi Klein looks at the Jewish perspective through the 5th commandment.
Honor your father and your mother.
Right. But note carefully what the text conspicuously leaves out.
It does not say love your father and mother.
Exactly. In Judaism, honor is a behavioral baseline. It is an action, a duty, not an emotional state.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. You honor your parents as an expression of baseline gratitude for your creation, acknowledging that they partnered with the divine to give you life.
Okay.
But it does not mandate that you feel warm affection for them if they were terrible, destructive parents.
Got it. And what about the Islamic perspective?
Professor Akhtar discussed the Islamic concept of silat al-rahim, maintaining family ties. And the linguistic connection he highlighted is just beautiful.
What's the connection?
The Arabic word for kinship, rahim, which translates to womb, shares a root with al-Raham.
And what does that mean?
It's one of God's primary names, meaning the most merciful.
Oh, wow. So kinship is literally rooted in divine mercy.
Exactly. The Islamic tradition is incredibly strict about this obligation. Severing family ties is considered a severe transgression.
Okay.
The Prophet Muhammad taught that true maintenance of family ties isn't just reciprocating when your family treats you well, it is maintaining those ties precisely when they mistreat you or cut you off.
I can hear listeners tensing up right now because that sounds like a divine mandate to stay trapped in an abusive situation.
And that is a critical misunderstanding of how these theologies operate in practice.
They don't force you to stay in danger.
Not at all. All of these traditions establish absolute limits. Rabbi Klein cited a profound rabbinic ruling concerning a daughter who had been sexually abused by her father. Okay.
The question posed to the rabbi was, does the commandment to honor her father require her to maintain contact?
And the ruling
Was an absolute no. She is completely exempt.
Okay, so safety supersedes filial duty.
100%. The baseline of honor exists, but if rendering that honor threatens your physical, emotional, or spiritual safety, the tradition commands separation.
That is such a relief to hear. But, in modern culture, we treat the word toxic like a catch-all buzzword for annoying.
We do. We've totally pathologized normal human friction.
Right. If a relative is a true biohazard-like, abusive, manipulative, dangerous, of course you evacuate. You cut contact.
Yes.
But if they just give you an emotional allergic reaction, like they're critical, they complain too much, they have wildly different politics, maybe you don't need to evacuate the building. Maybe you just need to wear gloves.
Wearing gloves is the perfect way to describe Pillemer's distinction between setting boundaries and setting terms.
What's the difference? Because modern therapy speak always encourages us to set boundaries. True, but vague boundaries fail miserably in estranged families.
Why is that?
Well, think about it. If you tell an estranged mother, I need you to respect my boundaries and stop being toxic, she has no idea what you mean.
Right, because in her mind, she isn't being toxic. She's just trying to be helpful or speaking her truth.
Exactly. Vague boundaries just lead to endless arguments about the definition of the words.
So what are terms then?
Setting terms is like giving someone a highly specific behavioral instruction manual.
I like that.
Terms are purely actionable and objective. So instead of saying, stop being toxic, you say, if you criticize my spouse's parenting while you are in our house, I will ask you to leave immediately.
Very clear. Very enforceable.
Or, you can visit your grandchildren, but you must stay in a hotel, not in our guest room.
It completely removes the emotional debate and focuses purely on mechanics.
Right. It allows you to maintain the biological and spiritual tie to fulfill Salat al-Rahim without absorbing the damage.
But let's be entirely realistic for a second. If someone refuses to apologize, and you have to wear emotional gloves and set strict behavioral terms just to tolerate a 30-minute phone call with them,
Yeah.
why bother forgiving them at all? Like, why do the heavy lifting for someone who isn't even trying?
This brings us to the zenith of the spiritual framework. The unilateral pardon?
The unilateral part.
Forgiving someone who hasn't asked for it and who objectively does not deserve it.
That is a tall order.
It is. Professor Akhtar broke down the Arabic vocabulary for forgiveness, and it reveals how profoundly layered this concept is. There isn't just one word. There are 3 distinct degrees of ascending difficulty.
Okay, walk us through the escalation of those degrees.
The first level is af, which translates to pardon. You release the person from the penalty or the revenge they legally or morally deserve.
Okay, step 1.
Pardon. The second, higher level, is saf, which means to overlook. You not only pardon them, but you deliberately refrain from ever throwing it back in their face during a future argument.
Oh, wow. You do not weaponize their past against them.
Exactly.
Which requires incredible discipline. I forgive you, and I am retiring this topic forever. I mean, that is hard. What is the ultimate level?
Maghfira. To cover and conceal. You protect the offender's dignity by completely covering their fault, transforming the relationship as if the offense never occurred.
As if it never occurred.
Yes. And the ultimate historical example of this is the Prophet Muhammad's conquest of Mecca.
Right, the psychological pressure in that historical moment must have been unimaginable.
Truly unimaginable.
Because he and his followers had endured over a decade of torture, assassinations, and exile by the Meccans. So when he finally returns victoriously, the people who mutilated his own family members are completely at his mercy.
They fully expected a massacre or mass enslavement. They had not repented.
But instead of vengeance, he declared a general amnesty. He said, "Go, you are free."
Yes. He extended a unilateral pardon to his worst persecutors.
That is a level of grace that feels almost superhuman. I mean, how does a normal person dealing with a sibling who stole their inheritance or a parent who abandoned them even begin to access that mindset?
The Sufi mystical tradition within Islam explains it through the concept of taqwa akhlaqallah,
Which means,
emulating the character traits of God. The great scholar Al-Ghazali used the metaphor of the human heart as a mirror.
a mirror. I like that visual.
The ultimate purpose of the heart is to reflect the divine light. But every time we hold on to a grudge, act out of ego, or harbor vengeance, we cover that mirror in dirt and grime.
The dirt occludes the mirror so it can no longer reflect anything transcendent.
Exactly. So forgiveness isn't really about the other person at all. It's about polishing your own mirror.
That is stunning. And this ancient mysticism actually maps perfectly onto Dr. Pillemer's modern sociological data, doesn't it?
It does. It's amazing. Pillemer found that people who manage to forgive and reconcile describe the grueling process as a massive engine for personal growth.
Really? Not just a burden.
No, they felt a profound sense of power and liberation. One subject described the feeling of unilateral forgiveness as finally taking off a 40-pound backpack they hadn't realized they were carrying for 20 years.
A 40-pound backpack.
Wow.
You do the grueling work of forgiveness not to absolve the offender, but for your own spiritual hygiene. You polish the mirror so you can breathe again.
Exactly.
When we forgive unilaterally, dropping the demand for cosmic fairness, we are actually participating in the divine patience. God is constantly carrying our burdens while we figure our stuff out.
Right.
So unilateral forgiveness is us offering that same profound patience to our deeply flawed families.
We are participating in the mechanics of grace.
We have covered some intense, deeply human territory today. To synthesize this for everyone listening, 65 million Americans are silently carrying the agony of ambiguous loss.
It's all around us.
We are separated by dual narratives of the past that will likely never align.
But whether you approach this through Pillemer's sociological data, the Talmudic wisdom of the Brisker Rav, the rigorous Christian standards of repentance, or the Sufi vision of the polished mirror of the heart, the blueprint for moving forward is remarkably consistent.
Yeah, it really is. We have to abandon the fantasy that we will receive a perfect, validating apology. We have to stop using vague labels like toxic to avoid conflict and start setting concrete behavioral terms.
And above all, we have to decouple the internal unconditional liberation of forgiveness from the external conditional work of reconciliation.
And the beauty of these tools, Teshuva, setting terms, dropping the 40-pound backpack, is that they aren't just for total family cutoffs.
No, not at all.
They apply to the micro-estrangements we navigate every single day in our marriages, our friendships, and our workplaces.
It completely reframes how you approach every conflict in your life.
It really does. So as we close out this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to sit with. We've spent this entire time dissecting how to forgive parents, children, siblings, and friends who have broken our trust.
But if the heart is truly a mirror, and estrangement is ultimately a reflection of our deepest vulnerabilities, what happens when you look into that polished glass and realize something startling?
What if the person you most urgently need to forgive for allowing your boundaries to be crossed, for carrying a heavy backpack of resentment for decades, or for making the agonizing but necessary choice to walk away is actually yourself,